Okay, so like Ryan said in his intro about the Chuck D essay, he wrote an open letter to hip hop. And one of the claims that he made was that there were a hip hop or rap Olympics. He felt that the United States wouldn't win gold, silver. He didn't say bronze, he said brass, because it's lost its social edge. And during the time, I think the article came out either 2011, 2012, and you're talking about a guy who has toured, right, 76 countries. And so he said at one point, hip hop, American hip hop, was like the '92 Olympic dream team. Like, we just dominated in every facet. And so now that it's spread across the world, other members across the world have studied it and have that social edge that America is sorely lacking. And there are artists in America who do have that social edge. They just don't have as big of a platform. Like, you have to actually search for them, but they're there. As far as the book, or the first poem that I'll read, thinking about place, is it's called Houston. Houston, where cookies and cream, custom painted Impalas sit on full moon-inch rims, where DJ Screw transformed tongue-twisting lyrics into slurred, 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 soliloquies that move, slower, slower than the elixir of purple drink poured into styrofoam, where the disturbing air of menace hitchhikes across tollways, where mother suckers be squeezed lines steady on the grind, where drop-top aggression lowers property value, where the exposed flesh of downtown buildings are tinted red from sunburn, where the ghost of Enron audits business ethics classes, where the press, media blacked out the gospel of desegregated lunch counters, where allergy forecasts report high levels of ragweed rebellion, where pigeons toss bread crusts to politicians, where rain is an estranged mother, where cats clock relief pitcher speed on interstates, where cops claim they come in peace when descending into residential war zones, where hot sauce enjoys being the life of the party, where local rap stars refuse to explode and become supernova sellouts. One of the earlier poets mentioned Vietnam, and so, like, when I say hip hop, when I think of hip hop, I think about it from that social construct as far as some of the factors that shaped it. And so, some of you might not know this. In the early '80s, New York was waging war on graffiti. There was this huge campaign to get rid of the graffiti on subway trains. And so, the reference to Vietnam is because the way they got rid of the graffiti on the subway trains, or tried to, was spraying Agent Orange. And so, based on the reaction, you guys know, Agent Orange, right? They used it in Vietnam because our soldiers were like sitting ducks, and they would, launch it from helicopters, and it would just strip the trees of the leaves. And so, if you imagine what that toxic chemical can do to plant life, imagine what it can do to human beings as those chemicals are walking. And it didn't even get rid of the graffiti; it smudged it, it made it look even worse. So it became even more of an eyesore. So there's a reference there. I also make a reference to boom bap, which is a style of rap music production that's heavy on the bass drums and snares. And I'm not sure if you guys remember kangaroo shoes you put your lunch money in. This poem is called Hip Hop Nostalgia. I miss raw boom bap, courageous cats stepping into ciphers and spitting fire so blazing Evil Knievel wouldn't come near it. Can't forget ambiguous graffiti font how interlocked S's, T's, and E's were arrows pointing young bloods towards celebrity status, their tagged metallic canvases passing through bodacious bodega burrows. But I don't miss Agent Orange's toxic fumes. Stop stripped South Bronx's ozone of oxygen molecules the way it stripped the leaves off trees in Vietnam. I miss kangaroo shoes. The zippered side pocket taught me the value of the dollar. I miss record needle static, not the sound of AIDS referred to as gay cancer. I miss classic underground shit that increased my vocab and introduced me to jazz. This next poem I'll read from the book, I'm dedicating this to Megan Minto. I think it's pretty surreal. We went to middle school together and high school, and we haven't seen each other since graduation, so we're talking 18 years. And we grew up in a place called Okaloosa County, which is in Northwest Florida. And a few weeks ago, one of the childhood friends I grew up with posted an article saying that somehow Fort Walton Beach is like 2 murders away from being like one of the murder capitals of the world, which is pretty insane. So when I read this poem now, it has a different edge to it. Okaloosa County. In Fort Walton Beach, Florida, Mama's house rattles from the aftermath of daisy cutters dropping on an Eglin Air Force Base test range. Her military retirement check can't cover the cost it takes to replace the windows. And you can catch the FDLE's sex offender database turbocharging lies to boost the engine of tourism. At Mr. J's barbershop, the baby boomers could care less about voting, but sport star-spangled do-rags and take pride in Air Jordan's Olympic butter gold dunk, courtesy of Magic's no look, behind the back, cinnamon apple pie dish. This poem is, I don't know if you guys remember JJ Fad, like they're like one-hit wonders. They had a song called Supersonic. This poem, I steal the title from that song. And this is basically, the premise is, you know, rap music is my first girlfriend, my first love. I'm trying to introduce her to my mom. So you can imagine how that turned out. So rap music's reputation precedes her. It's Supersonic. At Eglin Air Force Base, rumors about my first girlfriend traveled at the speed of sound. Some said she kept emergency parachutes in her purse because her hormones would tailspin. Others believed she was a crafty dope dealer who flew under the radar. On Bill Parkway, my mama's white diamond El Dorado became a sailplane sculpted by the Egyptian god of wind. Rushed to beat me home from school, only to catch footage of Tipper Gore branding a scarlet letter E for explicit across my girlfriend's breast. Yes, my teenage love bounced her booty like a subwoofer. But she knew more about Africa than my world history teacher. Is your girlfriend also the one who told you that blacks were the first people on earth? Yes, ma'am. I need to speak with her parents. She doesn't know who her real folks are. It's a toss-up between Bessie Smith and Charlie Parker. She has more godfathers than the Zulu Nation. The last poem I'll read from the book, and before I delve into Borderlands, I actually wrote this book for my son, Avery, who's now 2 years old. It's kind of bizarre reading this now because when I was writing the manuscript, he wasn't even born yet. And so I was kind of thinking about what I could leave behind for him, not to sound too morbid, but like if something were to happen to me, what would he know about me as far as like what I love? And you know, hip hop culture, as far as having that social edge, and I'm not being hyperbolic, but I learned more about myself, about my history, about my past from rap music than I did from school. I mean, this is true. And my wife said, well, you can't just say that, you gotta have a list of songs, because people are gonna call you on that. So I actually had a list of songs. And so I wrote this book for him so that he can get my take on hip hop culture, the good and the bad. But growing up, as far as like views on masculinity, what it meant to be a male, there were several people, my family members had, ideas about, who's a role model, or not a role model, but someone you should look up to. And it's interesting that they thought that because this guy actually came up with a Nike commercial challenging that notion. Charles Barkley, remember that commercial he had? So this poem is entitled Gothic Barkley. It's for my son, David Winston. In that black and white Nike commercial, I saw Barkley as a gargoyle perched on the low post block, both elbows extended like wings, ready to box out responsibility for hurling profanity as stale as popcorn. Barkley confessed he wasn't paid to be a role model. But 20 plus years later, I see Gothic Barkley as a lookout, encouraging boys to peer through the glamour of popping championship champagne and see the NBA for what it truly is. A place where McDonald's high school All-Americans who have started every game since 6th grade will be exceptional enough to have 12th man status on a pro team, giving only 9 dudes playing time. Exceptional enough to have less marketing value than a mascot. Avery, by the time you see the ad, the whole desolate gym aura, the black and white cinematography, intense as Gothic Barkley's grunts and the rebounds he snatches with authority, you might find the imagery annoying, like the constant shrieks you hear in the background. Here's the intimidating truth. My father retired from the Air Force as a major, but if he got paid to dunk a basketball and wreak havoc on the court, I might have ignored his verbal abuse like a referee. Think of this poem as a late, late whistle. Parents should be role models, but Gothic Barkley wanted to say more, that just because the head of my household refuses to man up, I shouldn't expect Nikes to transform him into Time Magazine's Father of the Year. But Nike would never prove that message. It's too gloomy, scarier than a Victorian novel about how lightning can bring back the dead to life, but can't resurrect a decaying relationship between father and son. If poetry can achieve what 100 million watts of electricity can, by the time you read this piece, your granddad and I will have ended our 7-year silence. Son, no matter how much our bond might decompose, from my end, the stench won't smell as bad as mold. Even if your shoe size is bigger than 11 and a half, make sure you address me by the same title given to Barkley, sir. The poems, and you guys are actually fortunate. You guys have the privilege of hearing new work. So this is part of the new manuscript that I'm working on. In Olympic Buttergold, I have a few poems about masculinity, a few poems about fatherhood, a few poems about being a husband, education, my experience being a teacher. But this next manuscript is going to deal specifically about being a husband and fatherhood. And I'm actually surprised that there haven't been more male poets who have written what it's like to be, like a husband. And so that's uncharted territory that I felt like I wanted to explore. And so these poems kind of deal with the struggle to get pregnant, like infertility, like those battles. And these poems also deal with the challenges of fatherhood and also the joys too of being the first time. So the first poem I'll read is entitled Comforting Anguish, and it kind of gives you a little bit more background behind Gothic Barkley, between the tension between my father and myself. Comforting Anguish. Not much pain medication my pregnant wife can take. All I can offer are deep tissue massages, honey roasted almonds, and forehead kisses. Never saw my father comfort my mother. On nights, he'd come home from Hurlburt Air Force Base and scream at her for hours, smash expensive plates as if they were records containing subliminal messages, begging my mother to leave without even grabbing her shit. Those nights after fights, My father cranked up the volume of the stereo and played Love Deluxe. Sade's sultry voice possessed the power to dissolve the icy craziness in that house. My wife, Sade, possesses the power to make me believe I can discard my toxic past without polluting the Gulf. Our soon-to-be firstborn kicks like a fish out of water, comforting anguish that our boy is somewhat safe, but the bile oil Sade rubs on her stomach can't ward off the scar of anxiety. My fear of a preterm birth growing massive like a fibroid. There's no pill I can take that will enable me to hold my breath from the time we check into the clinic until the time our high-risk doctor breaks the suspense that my wife's cervix is in good shape and hasn't decreased in diameter. When he mispronounces Sade's name and calls her Shade, my wife cringes like she's having contractions. But I smile because she offers me shade. She has branches for arms, and the perennial leaves of her fingers are eager to catch my tears. But I am my mother's son and do not allow tears to come. Just words, sunflower seeds I chew for hours on end. After Sade's hood smashed against a ravine and scrunched up into an inverted V. What's scarier than the accident? Sade's response, bereft of the memory of how she had lost control. And I couldn't even remember if I had kissed her and Avery goodbye before I bounced, or allowed the words, I love you, to register subliminally like auto-tuned lyrics broadcasted on the radio. Instead of standing outside my classroom and greeting students as they walked through the door, I stood on the side of the road and watched the tow truck pull the Malibu out of the ditch. My back turned against the delay of traffic. Those drivers stuck in the rear wouldn't sweat them if they sighed. And for those who were up close, wouldn't trip if they viewed my misfortune as an inconvenience that broke their reverie, because I do believe in karma. And I just have two more. My son, there was a time when he got really excited, like 5 o'clock in the morning to brush his teeth, like he's just waking up. I'm glad those days are over. So this poem is effectively titled Brush Teeth. So, because my son's awake at 5, every organism on the planet is hard at work. The mosquitoes posted up by the fence, guarding their turf of standing water. The dust on sly stones, small talk, insulating a trippy groove. Avery Langston wedges his finger between his lips and barks a command that doesn't drive my fogginess into logic's open arms. It's scary how quickly my ceramic watch refuses bribes, as if Starbucks gift cards aren't tantalizing enough to make time brew up an excuse to rewind life back 10 minutes prior to when Avery crawled on top of me and drooled on my cheek. Dada, brush teeth. Which means he's really just game for being cradled while sucking fruit-flavored Colgate off of bristles. He chomps down on the brush and grabs the handle with the aggression of a teenager affirming independence. I hope Avery's assertiveness won't be a baby tooth that'll loosen up and fall out. But that moment is an eternity from now, which will arrive at any given second. And this is the last poem. I wanted to write a poem about what it's like being a father, like being in those moments where you're a man and you feel helpless at times. And I wanted to capture that, not to get too overly sentimental, but I wanted to like paint a vivid picture of what that's like from a male person's point of view. So this poem is entitled On Fatherhood. Hearing my baby boy cry, that gets easier with time. What's always heartbreaking is the face he makes before he hollers. The way his frown hangs lower than drool and his cheeks turn redder than letters on alphabet blocks make the discomfort of having less time to spend as a husband painless. I check his forehead for temperature with the diligence of a fertility specialist examining blood tests for hormone levels as Avery moves his mouth in synchronicity with his pulse. The nonsense word oozing from his lips is new gravel, failing to fill in hairline cracks along the tiled floor of comprehension. Being a father doesn't mean losing faith in language. It means giving up on science and learning how to become the world's greatest magician. So I swallow my fear of singing like a sword and produce a microphone from an empty pan. Waving his teething ring, I tell Avery Langston that on the count of 3, when I start crooning, my off-key scales will be calming like the sound of a roly-poly chime ball. After I belt the first few bars, my son flashes a sly smile, suggesting he's pretending to be fooled for the sake of my ego.